Good afternoon, everybody. It is my pleasure this afternoon to be able to interview Ian about his writing, his publishing, and his other interests in life, perhaps.
Maybe.
I know what you do in your spare time. So tell us about your desire to write. When did it start and where did it come from?
It started when I was 5. I can remember explicitly. I had one of those soft cover notebooks that the top half was plain and the bottom half was lined, and I wrote a story about a little boy going into space and drew the pictures on the top half. And it was, I don't know, it was 15, 20 pages long. I mean, it was probably quite enormous for a 5-year-old.
Yes.
And I've got a feeling my parents may still have that book.
Gosh.
But that's absolutely where it started.
Wow. And where did the idea about space come in? Was this around the time that the trips to space, trips to the moon were to the forefront?
No, I'm much older than that, Kate. No, I guess, you know, a 5-year-old boy dreams of space and being an engine driver and things like that. So I think it was just one of those things that small boys are interested in. Yes,
yes. So was English your top subject at school?
No, it wasn't, actually. My best subjects were all in maths and the sciences.
Right.
And that's kind of where I excelled, and I think I was probably average. But when I got to the end of my O-levels, something told me that I shouldn't give up on English. And so I said to the school, you know, for A-level, can I do maths and physics? Because they were bankers, and can I do English as well? And the school said no.
As they did in those days.
As they did in those days, because it would mess up their timetable. You know, no one did maths and English. So I left. You could leave school in those days. So I left and I went to work first for British Rail, as it was then, which was fun because it was playing with trains, but it was unfulfilling. And then worked for the Ministry of Defence for a while, which wasn't fun and also was unfulfilling. And there was something missing. Yes. And I found a sixth form college near where I lived. That I remember an interview with HR in the establishment I was working in on Portsdown Hill, north of Portsmouth, and I'd been there a few months, and it was plain I wasn't happy. And the HR person said to me, and they're the only HR person I've ever come across who's actually asked this question. They said to me, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to write." And she said, "Well, what are you doing here?" So I left there. I left there as well. I was always leaving places, and found a college that would let me do maths and English, and that's where I discovered Auden and Yeats and Forster, and you know, and hallelujah, basically.
Yes. Yes, but I mean, it's so true in those days that if you didn't fit into the pattern that the school wanted you to, tough.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah,
absolutely
never mind what
right.
you wanted to do. Yeah, I know. So, from that time, you've always written?
Yes. I did my degree in English literature.
Yeah.
And then when it came to leaving university, I had three options. One was to go into teaching, one was to do a postgrad, and the third was to get a job. And I was fed up of being poor. And I started on a career in information technology. I fell back on those old science and maths skills, and learned to be a computer programmer. And stayed in IT as a career for over 30 years. And was one of the worst decisions I think I ever made. But always written. I wrote a lot at university, and then kind of sporadically through my IT career, because work and life kind of gets in the way. But never really stopped. Had kind of moments of where I was fairly prolific.
Yes.
And then sometimes whole years when I wasn't, I think.
Yeah. So did you use any of these experiences in what you were writing?
From my working life?
Yes, or from what you loved and hated about your working life, as it were?
Not explicitly, in the sense of what I write about today. Implicitly, in terms of I love stealing people, and writing about the people I steal, because there's endless fascination there. And so I think on that journey there would have been people that I would have stored away for future reference. Where it is actually relevant and where there is a crossover was in 1999. I saw an advert in Computer Weekly, and there was a publisher who was looking for writers, because they wanted to get into writing books, again, books published about IT.
Yeah.
And I responded to the advert on the basis that I was fairly confident I could write, and I had lots of experience, over the years of writing all sorts of things. And I also had this store of, 25 years of IT experience, or 20 years of IT experience. And I thought, well, why not kind of see if I could merge them together? And they offered me a contract, and I wrote a book about IT management and planning. And then on the back of that, wrote two more books with Bertelsmann, who were part of their huge publishing empire. So I wrote 3 books in 4 years, all about IT. And the most significant thing about all of that was I came out of the end of it knowing I could write, validating I could put one word in front of another and make sense. Those books are still available, and if you go on Amazon, and there's one of them as a hardback which retails at about £135. So if anyone's interested, please help yourself.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. That's an achievement. So where did the poetry come in?
Again, from very, very early on. I had a poem published in our local newspaper, which was the Portsmouth Evening something, Echo or Standard. I had a poem published when I was about 8. And then when I was about 13 or 14, one of my poems, I think it was about buses or something. I gave it to the local library, the local museum in Gosport, and they framed it and put it in the entrance hall to the local museum. So when you went in, the first thing you saw, and as a boy of 12 or something, it was just wonderful. So always written poetry as well as
Yeah.
prose.
Yes. And do you know which you prefer, or does it depend what day of the week it is, or?
It's a question I've always kind of asked myself, and it probably depends what day of the week it is. It probably depends who I'm talking to.
Yes.
I think on Monday I can be a poet, and Tuesday I can be a novelist, you know. But the one thing where I think it's really great is that being able to have, you know, a foot in both camps, if you like.
Yes.
I love having multiple projects on the go at the same time.
Yeah.
And because they're so different,
Yes.
it means that if I get kind of tired of one in the afternoon, I can go to the other, and I think it keeps both fresh, really.
And don't you think sometimes it depends on what you're reading at the moment as well? Because sometimes if you're reading poetry, you can be inspired to write poetry.
Yes, yeah, you can, and there's a very good example right at the moment, actually, which is fairly recently. Rafe Fiennes toured the country doing a reading of Eliot's 4 quartets.
Yeah.
And the BBC recorded it, and they've shown it recently on iPlayer. I saw that and was absolutely blown away by it. That was probably a couple of months ago. And it made me go back and read the 4 quartets and The Wasteland and Prufrock. And I'd obviously read them years ago when I was at university, but there was something reading them this time that, because of being older and wiser, I think I got a bit more out of it. And I was inspired to try and write something, you know, not like Eliot, but obviously,
Yes.
but inspired by.
Yeah.
So I'm quite close to finishing a very long piece, which takes about 30 minutes to read, actually. And it's a little bit different for me, but I think it's got something in it, and I'm looking forward to finding a way to getting it in. I mean, it's easy enough for me. It's easy enough to get it into print, but I'm
Yes.
looking forward to trying to find a way to actually perform it, I think,
Yes.
next year. Yes, it does
Yes.
depend on what you're reading.
Yeah.
Although I tend to find that I read more fiction than I do poetry. I think it's fair to say.
Right. Right. So I sometimes find good fiction, if I find good fiction which is written really well, can have a poetic bent to it, which sends me off to write poetry.
Right.
And it depends on the writer and how good they are.
Yeah.
With their language and their use of language. But if it's poetic, that can push me into writing poetically.
I think.
you?
No, I agree with you, and there are some authors who are, who of that bent, and then,
Yes.
their language is much more poetic. I think one of the challenges when you're writing prose and reading fiction is not to make sure you don't allow the two to bleed together.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you're in the middle of writing something and you read Ishiguro or something,
Yes.
you don't try and become,
Yes.
like
Yes.
that. So there's a certain discipline.
Yes.
There may be things that you take away for the future,
Yes.
but you have to be really careful not to copy.
Yes. So do you keep a notebook and walk around with a notebook and write things down then?
No, I don't.
No.
I keep a notebook. Whether I should say this or not, I keep a notebook in the bathroom,
Right.
and a torch and a pen, and it has been known at 3 o'clock in the morning for me to be in the bathroom with the torch on, because I've had a line, and that's
Yeah.
one of the most amazing things, and it's a wonderful thing too, but when you suddenly get a line,
Yes.
or you suddenly get the opening to, you know, a paragraph or the first, whatever it is, and you can't get to sleep because you lay there thinking, I'm going to remember this, I'm going to remember this, and you just have to write it down because
Yes.
those things are quite precious, really.
Yes. Yes. Oh, yes, they are. And you, well, I don't know about you. People say they do remember them. I don't.
No.
I'm always convinced I'll remember this in the morning. You know, the words aren't the right way round, or I've forgotten one of the words that was in it,
absolutely.
or whatever. You're right. You have to write it down, don't you?
Yeah, and obviously everyone's got mobile phones these days, and you know there are apps and you can make notes and things. So I use that occasionally.
Yes. 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 So, where did the publishing come into this then?
So the publishing came into it in I think it was about 2012-ish when I discovered Amazon
Yeah.
Kindle Direct.
Yeah.
And found that it was really easy to get a book. It was easy to get a book into Kindle format and on an Amazon website.
Yeah.
And I went through a period when I made this discovery of creating all of these books using Amazon Kindle. And you know, that process was the most exciting thing in a way. The books were dreadful, not the words in the books, but the physical books.
Yes.
You know, the layout was awful. The covers were terrible, and the other problem was that it may be slightly different now, but in those days, if you went through Amazon, that was the only place people could buy a book. So you couldn't get it into a bookshop and all those kind of things. And then I kind of woke up one day and thought, you know, this is wholly unsatisfactory. It's not really publishing, and it's not right. So I found a different middleman, Ingram Spark, and started to move my books away from Kindle onto Ingram. And the great thing about using someone like Ingram Spark is it's not free and you have to buy an ISBN and all of that.
Yeah.
But once you publish a book through them, the day it's published, it goes live to Amazon and Waterstone and Barnes and Noble in the US. So a dozen online retailers and bookshops can order it.
Yeah.
And so you lose that constraint. So I went through a process to about 2017, migrating all my stuff onto this new platform, and learned how to put a decent book together in terms of a cover and layout and things like that. And then it occurred to me one day that, you know, that was a skill I could share. So I knew how to make a decent book. And I think the first thing I did was produce an anthology for the North Yorkshire Stanza.
Yeah.
And then I produced a book for a friend of mine, and it's kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah.
So I set up Cover Story Books as my brand, if you like. And this year I will have published 10 books, only 2 of which are my own. And some anthologies and it's, I get a lot of satisfaction from helping people get published.
So, within that process, then, are you using your IT skills at all?
Yes.
I mean, the ones that you learnt, at work, has that helped you towards doing this?
I think undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Learning how to use the software that you need and layouts for covers, and I get really frustrated with people when they submit things to me and it's clear that, you know, they don't know how to use Word properly and things like that.
Yeah.
So undoubtedly it's helped.
Yes.
And so I can create a book relatively quickly, and the IT skills is
Yes.
and all the experience is what
Yes.
makes it possible.
Yes, yes. So the books that you're writing now, am I right in thinking that you're doing a reprint or a rewrite of one of your books?
Yes.
Is that Manston Key or Manston Key?
Yes,
Yeah.
Manston Key. I've just released a second edition,
Yes.
and it's partly to go back. I mean, you always kind of miss the odd thing,
Yes.
no matter how hard you try not to.
Yeah.
But it's also, I'm a different writer now
Yes.
to 5 years ago. Writing's a never-ending apprenticeship,
Yes.
and no one is ever the finished article,
Yeah.
and you can't possibly be.
No.
And so in the last few months, I've kind of reissued, if you like, a new version of Manston Key and my 2 collections of short stories. I've done those as well.
Right.
So as a kind of background task, I'm gradually going through
Yeah.
what I've already produced,
Yes.
as well as working on new things as well.
Yes. Yeah. And what are you working on at the moment? Other than I know about the poetry things that you're doing, but the fiction.
So I have got a novel called Once Significant Others, which I finished probably about May or June, and am trying to go down a traditional publishing route for that. So I'm trying to get an agent for it.
Right.
I sent copies out, advanced copies out to some people to read,
Yeah.
and have had some really, really encouraging feedback.
Good.
One lady said at the end of her review, she said that the novel had made her look at herself in a different light. And someone else said it was like Henry James meets Sally Rooney, which I'll take that all day long, actually.
Absolutely, yes.
Particularly the first part. So I've got that, and I'm trying to find an agent for that. I've also got a finished collection of short stories, and I've just finished the first draft of another novel as well, because I can't stop.
Yeah.
It's an addiction. It's I've no idea what being hooked on heroin or anything is like, but it's an addiction. And I'm doing lots of editing at the moment.
Yeah.
And that feeling inside about wanting to start the next thing, it kind of bubbles away and then gradually gets stronger and stronger. And the other day, I had the idea for the opening of something, and it may turn out to be nothing, but there is nothing like that process of, for me, nothing like that process of creation.
Yes. Yes.
So lots in the pipeline, all of which will see the light of day next year for sure.
Yes.
One way or another.
Yes. Yeah.
One way or another.
Yeah. Yes, because as you say, when you go back and read the things that you have written previously, you have changed because time has moved on and you've had new experiences, and also you have perhaps looked at or read other people's things which make you think, oh, maybe I need to approach this differently. So do you think you will reappraise everything that you've written earlier?
I mean that's a great question, and the answer is no, and the reason the answer is no is because I think poetry is very different. So I had the notion of doing that, and I went back to some of the things that I wrote 30, 40 years ago, some of the poetry I wrote 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I thought, I mean, that's dreadful. The older me looking back on some of that juvenile stuff is, there are some things that I'm kind of vaguely ashamed of. And there was part of me that wanted to, while the idea may be okay, to go back and go through that process and kind of update it with the new me. But I don't think you can do that with poetry, because I think poetry is much more of the moment. And I think if you can rewrite and edit fiction and tweak the way sentences are constructed and things like that. But when you try and do that with poetry, I think you lose the essence of that moment when it was written. And so what I did was, having tried that a little bit, I said I'm not going to do that wholesale review. So I went back through my poetry collections and pulled out. I did that this year. I pulled out all of the pieces that I was really happy with, no matter when I wrote them, and I pulled them together in a selected edition. But there's no point. I mean, if I went back and edited a love poem I wrote in 1981, I dread to think what I'd end up with.
Yes. Yeah, so you lose the freshness sometimes, don't
Absolutely
you?
right.
Even if it's not your best work, you lose the freshness of the language that was just there at that moment, don't you?
Yeah, without question.
Yeah.
Without question.
So the other things that you're doing that move around with your writing, your work in the library, and you work with Ripon writers. How do you see that evolving and helping with your writing?
Ripon Writers is an interesting one because it's a long-standing group. It's been going for 72 years or something, isn't it? And having kind of just been elected chair, it's not changed very much from when I was first a member, which was back in 2012 or something. And I think there are opportunities with that group to get more people involved, to freshen it up, to get some more members to try some new things. Because it's interesting, Ripon's not a huge place, but there are multiple writing groups.
Yes.
All offering something different. And so I think there's the chance to kind of pick the best bits from various things and breathe some new life into it, hopefully. The other thing that I do, which really does help my writing, is I've started mentoring. I'm writing retreats.
Right.
And I started that this year, and I've mentored on 5 now, I think it is. I'm doing another one starting next Thursday. And part of my role there is to sit down and have one-to-one sessions with other writers. And we talk about their work.
Yes.
And that can be really rewarding, because you can make a suggestion that, you're just a sounding board, but you can make a suggestion that they haven't thought about, and when you see the penny drop or someone gets something out of what you've said. But that's inspiring because there's an element of kind of a validation of me as a writer and my experience, all those kind of things. But you can get, ideas from those experiences that you can take into your own into your own work as well. Yes.
So does this make you feel that you've got a bit of a teacher in you, a bit of a nurturer and a teacher of other people?
Possibly. When I was in my professional life, the largest team of people I ran, I had a team of 152. And when the team was about 100, 110, I knew everybody by name. I could have conversations with them all by the coffee machine.
Yeah.
And my style professionally was always kind of very collaborative.
Yes.
And so I think I've that sort of experience that I think I can bring into those
Yes.
those mentoring
Yes.
events.
Yes. And do you enjoy the publishing and the design of the books?
I do. I do. I enjoy the publishing because I've published books for people who would struggle to get published.
Yes.
And I know what that feels like. So when that book turns up, the first book turns up with your name on the cover,
Yes.
and you can feel it and you can
Yes.
smell it.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I know what that feels like, and so helping other people
Yes.
get that experience, I think is tremendous. I suppose I enjoy the technical side of it. I really like putting covers together.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I certainly don't do it for the money.
Right. You're not on your way to your first million then. You're
I
not,
am first.
You know?
Well, I don't know. Maybe first million Indonesian baht, but certainly not pounds sterling.
No. No.
More's the pity.
More's the pity, hey? More's the pity. No, that's true. I don't think any of us who write think we're going to get rich doing it, do we?
No.
No, not really. No. But the other thing I want to ask you about, because I haven't asked you for a while, is how's the allotment doing?
It's pretty soggy, and I think it's been neglected for a few weeks.
Has it?
It has. Yeah, it has.
Has it done well this summer?
Yeah, we've done all right, providing you didn't want onions. The spuds were okay, the tomatoes were fantastic, the beetroot was good, the leeks were good. You know, it's not my natural milieu, shall we say. I'm just the skivvy, really.
I see.
Sarah's the one with all the talents, growing wise.
Yes. Yes. But it's a nice way of spending a bit of time, and you know, you can think such a lot whilst you're out there digging and planting, and you know, the words go around in your head.
Yeah, I
Don't they?
think one of the things that we have as writers is we're never not working.
No.
You know,
No.
I think it's not one of those things you can turn on and off.
No.
And you know, you can be sitting in a coffee shop just observing.
Yes.
You know, I remember we went to the Municipal Art Gallery in York, and we had a coffee, and we were served by a waitress who was from somewhere in Eastern Europe. And it was a normal experience.
Yes.
But there was
Yes.
just something about the day, the moment, the waitress.
Yes.
You know, I took her home. I mean, not really took her home, but I took her home, and
Yes.
you know, there is a short story
Yes.
in my new collection that is just based on that kind
Yeah.
of chance encounter.
Yes.
And so I think, you know, you never switch off.
No.
You know, you're always processing and borrowing things, and
Yes.
and even though you don't realize it, in the background you're kind of putting things together, and do they work or do they not work? So yeah, all of the time. And I get frustrated with people who say they've got writer's block and that they can't think of anything to write about, because there's more than you could ever write about, and we're surrounded by it all the time. You know, and our lives, everybody's lives are full of things that if they wanted to, they could write about.
Yes.
You know, there is, in a way, I think there's no excuse, you know. So never not working, Kate, one way or another.
Well, I always get that feeling. I mean, I do wonder if you ever sleep, the amount of stuff that you turn out and the things that you do, I have to say. But I think it's about observation. Some people observe things and, as you say, take them home with you. Other people don't see. And I think that's part of the writer's block thing, is that the observation's not good enough, not the writing.
Yeah,
the observing.
And maybe there's something in the translation of what you're seeing.
Yes.
You know, maybe we are. I consider myself astonishingly fortunate, especially given, you know, my background and what I could have been. I consider myself, you know, astonishingly fortunate, and I think maybe those of us who do write just have that. I don't know what it is, that gene that allows us to take a waitress and an experience of being served coffee and turn it into something else.
Yes.
Or to look into someone else's life or imagine a life.
Yes.
And then replay it. Because I was on a retreat last week, mentoring on a retreat last week, and one of the courses I ask some kind of fundamental questions about, you know, why do you write and what kind of writer are you, and things like that. And for me, in addition to it being addiction and all the rest of it, writing helps me make sense of the world. And that's one of the reasons I think, I do it, is exactly that.
Yeah.
You know, and I have a fascination with history, but from a personal point of view. And most of my characters in my fiction are people who are trying to process something in their history, coming to terms with their past, something that's happened, something they did, something they should have done, something that they didn't do. And I find that endlessly fascinating.
Yes, and the number of people who have that something in their background, there must be millions and millions of us, mustn't there?
Yeah,
and have something.
And I think that's a great thing. I mean, I was never going to be. I was never going to be a frivolous writer.
No.
No. You know, with the childhood I had and the background I grew up with, you know, I was never going to be anything other than someone who looked and tried to understand their relationship with their past, and then through the writing and creating people and observing people, trying to understand their relationship with their past. And I haven't worked it out. I'll never work it out. But it's fun trying.
Yes. And you see these things from a different perspective with each decade of your life that passes, don't you? You look back, you see it differently. Yeah,
I think you do. And the novel I mentioned earlier, the Once Significant Others.
Yes.
It's a story of a group of people who, there were 6 of them, and they lived together in the same town just after graduating from university. And one of them dies through illness, and her request is that the other 5 come back together after 30 years, because she feels that there are some things that need to be said, there are some clarifications that need to happen about those events.
Yes.
And so I have these 5 characters who, from their individual perspectives, are looking back at the same events, because, you know, what really happened, what is the truth? And so you see one event from multiple perspectives, and
Yeah.
I think that kind of triangulation and understanding our relationship with our past and all those kind of things is embodied in that novel in many ways.
Yes. That's fascinating, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you would like to say about your writing or any other aspect of the work that you do that I haven't given you a chance, that I haven't asked you?
No, you give me plenty of chances. No, I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so, Kate. Thank you very much.
If anybody else has any questions, are you happy to take those?
If they do, fire away.
A small question. You talk about how you look at people's past and how they relate to their own history. So how would you categorise your novels? Do they fit into any one particular category? I mean, for instance, I'm looking at sci-fi and graphic and foreign fiction. So where would you place your novels?
I'm not a fan of genre, because I don't think mine have any. I think you would have to. It's easy to say what they're not, in a way. I mean, they're not crime, they're not sci-fi, they're not fantasy. It's contemporary or literary fiction, I guess. So when the comment about it's Henry James meets Sally Rooney, I was most pleased about the Henry James thing, and you know, my favourite authors will give you a clue. It's people like Graham Swift and Ishiguro and Julian Barnes, and you know, so that's the sort of thing I like. So they're serious. Not a lot happens, so they're not page turners from that point of view, because that's not what I'm trying to understand.
So when you go on to hidden genre, it's actually you're very much describing a literary novel. Right?
Yeah, I think so.
And I also noticed when you mentioned it earlier, you didn't mention the embedded work of modern book of practical tasks.
And I have never read it, I have to say.
Oh, shameful, shameful. I read the website once, a long time ago. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ian.
No, thank you, Kate.
That's been fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.